David was sitting in his office on an ordinary Tuesday morning when his whole world changed. He was 34 years old, worked as an accountant, and had never really thought much about his health. He went for runs sometimes, ate reasonably well, and considered himself pretty normal. That morning, he was reviewing spreadsheets for a client when something odd happened. He felt his heart beating. Not like when you finish a workout and your chest is pounding. This was different. He could feel every single beat, one after another, like someone had turned up the volume inside his chest. At first, he thought maybe he was just stressed. The meeting was important, and he had a lot riding on getting this account right. So he took a deep breath, tried to relax, and continued with his presentation. But the feeling didn't go away. Throughout the entire meeting, through lunch, and into the afternoon, David remained aware of his heartbeat. It was like suddenly becoming conscious of your own breathing and then not being able to stop thinking about it. Except this was his heart, the one organ he'd always taken for granted, now demanding his constant attention. When he got home that evening, his wife noticed something was off. David kept touching his chest, pressing his palm against it, as if checking something. She asked if he was feeling okay, and he said yes, but he wasn't entirely sure. How do you explain to someone that you can suddenly feel something that's been happening your whole life without you noticing? That night, lying in bed, it got worse. In the quiet darkness, David could hear nothing but his own heartbeat. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. Regular as a clock, steady as a drum. He tried counting sheep. He tried thinking about work. He tried focusing on his breathing. Nothing helped. His heart was beating, and he knew it, felt it, couldn't escape it. By the third day, David started to worry seriously. He hadn't slept properly in 2 nights. At work, he found himself distracted during important calls. His colleagues would ask him questions, and he'd have to ask them to repeat themselves because all he could focus on was that constant rhythm in his chest. It wasn't painful. That was the strange part. There was no ache, no pressure, no discomfort. Just awareness. Pure, unfiltered awareness. Of his heart doing its job. He started doing research online during his lunch breaks. Was this normal? Could other people feel their heartbeats all the time? The answers he found weren't reassuring. Most people said they only noticed their heartbeat occasionally, maybe after climbing stairs or during moments of excitement. Nobody described feeling it constantly, every waking moment, like a prisoner listening to water drip in a cell. David tried to convince himself it would pass. Maybe it was just a phase, something that would disappear as mysteriously as it had arrived. He threw himself into work, taking on extra projects, staying late at the office. If he could just stay busy enough, maybe he wouldn't notice. But even surrounded by ringing phones and chattering coworkers, even in the middle of complex calculations, there it was. His heart. Beating. Always beating. His wife grew more concerned. She suggested he see a doctor, but David hesitated. What would he even say? Doctor, I can feel my heart beating. That sounded ridiculous. Every person's heart beats. That's what keeps you alive. But she insisted. And finally, David agreed. He made an appointment for the following week. In the meantime, he tried everything he could think of. He stopped drinking coffee, thinking maybe caffeine was making him more sensitive. He avoided spicy food. He tried meditation apps that promised to calm the mind and body. Nothing worked. If anything, paying attention to his breathing during meditation only made him more aware of his heartbeat. The two rhythms seemed to dance together, his breath and his pulse, and he couldn't tune either one out. The worst moments came at night. David would lie perfectly still, and in that stillness, his heartbeat seemed louder than ever. He started counting the beats. 70 per minute, 4,200 per hour, 100,000 per day. The numbers haunted him. His heart was working constantly, never resting, and now he was forced to witness every single beat. It felt like watching a clock tick when you're trying to fall asleep, except he couldn't remove the batteries or turn off the sound. By the time his doctor's appointment arrived, David was exhausted and desperate. He hadn't had a proper night's sleep in over a week. His work was suffering. His relationships were strained, all because of something as simple and essential as a heartbeat. The doctor's office was busy that morning. David sat in the waiting room, surrounded by people coughing, reading magazines, staring at their phones. He wondered if any of them could feel their hearts beating right now. Probably not. They looked relaxed, bored even. He envied them. That peace. When his name was called, David followed the nurse to an examination room. She took his blood pressure, checked his temperature, and asked routine questions. Everything was normal. When the doctor finally came in, David tried to explain what was happening. The words felt inadequate. How do you describe the sensation of being trapped inside your own body, hyper-aware of a process that should be automatic and invisible? The doctor listened carefully, then began a physical examination. He pressed a stethoscope against David's chest, listening intently. He checked David's pulse at his wrist, at his neck. He asked David to breathe deeply, to hold his breath, to cough. After what felt like forever, the doctor stepped back and smiled gently. "Your heart sounds perfectly healthy," he said. David felt a mix of relief and frustration. Healthy was good. Healthy meant he wasn't dying. But healthy also meant there might not be an easy fix. The doctor explained that he wanted to run some tests, just to be thorough. An electrocardiogram to check the electrical activity. Maybe an echocardiogram to look at the structure. Blood work to rule out thyroid problems or anemia. Over the next 3 weeks, David went through test after test. He wore a monitor on his chest for 24 hours that recorded every heartbeat. He ran on a treadmill while connected to machines. He had blood drawn so many times he lost count, and every single test came back the same way. Normal. Perfectly, frustratingly normal. The cardiologist he was referred to reviewed all the results and gave the same verdict. "Your heart is functioning exactly as it should," she said. Sometimes people become more aware of their heartbeat due to stress or anxiety. Have you been under unusual pressure lately? David wanted to laugh. Before this started, his life had been ordinary. Maybe a bit boring, even. Work was steady but not overwhelming. His marriage was good. He had no major problems. The only stress in his life now was this constant awareness that nobody seemed able to explain or fix. The cardiologist suggested he might benefit from seeing a therapist. Anxiety can manifest in physical ways, she explained. Sometimes when we focus too much on a bodily sensation, it becomes a loop. The more you think about it, the more you notice it, which makes you think about it more. David left that appointment feeling defeated. He wasn't anxious. Or at least, he hadn't been before his heart decided to announce itself. Now, yes, he felt anxious all the time. But that was because of the heartbeat awareness, not the cause of it, wasn't it? He tried seeing a therapist anyway. The woman was kind and patient. She taught him breathing exercises and progressive muscle relaxation. She talked about cognitive behavioral therapy and how thoughts influence feelings. David tried everything she suggested, but nothing changed the fundamental problem. His heart continued to beat, and he continued to feel every single beat. His wife was running out of patience. Not with anger, but with helplessness. She didn't know how to help him anymore. Their conversations had become repetitive. "How are you feeling today?" she'd ask. "The same," he'd reply. They stopped going out with friends. David couldn't enjoy restaurants or movies or parties when his entire focus was internal. Work gave him medical leave, which somehow made everything worse. At least at the office, there had been external demands on his attention. Now, sitting at home day after day, there was nothing to distract him from his own body. He'd sit on the couch, television on but unwatched, just feeling his heart work. 60 beats per minute at rest. Faster when he stood up. Slower when he lay down. Every variation registered in his consciousness like an alarm he couldn't silence. He found online forums where other people described similar experiences. Reading their stories was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because he wasn't alone or crazy. Terrifying because some of them had been living with this for years with no resolution. They shared tips and tricks. Some took medication to slow their heart rate, hoping that fewer beats meant less to notice. Others had given up looking for solutions and were just trying to accept their new reality. David wasn't ready to accept it. This couldn't be his life now. There had to be an answer somewhere. 2 months had passed since that Tuesday morning when everything changed. David had seen 5 different doctors, tried 3 types of medication, and read countless medical journals online. Nothing helped. His heart continued its relentless rhythm, and he continued to feel every beat. The hardest part wasn't the physical sensation anymore. It was the isolation. How do you explain to people that you're suffering from something that isn't technically wrong? His family tried to understand, but he could see the confusion in their eyes. His friends had mostly stopped calling. His wife had moved past concern and into a kind of tired acceptance. She still cared. But there were only so many conversations you could have about the same unfixable problem. David started sleeping in the guest room. He told his wife it was because his restlessness kept her awake, which was partly true. But really, he needed space. Space from her worried glances, from the unspoken questions, from the reminder that he used to be different. In the guest room, surrounded by boxes of old books and winter clothes, he could be alone with his strange affliction. The nights were the hardest. During the day, there was at least light, the possibility of distraction, the structure of meals and routines. But at night, in the darkness, there was only David and his heartbeat. He'd lie on his back, eyes open, feeling that steady thump, thump, thump. He became an expert on his own cardiovascular system. He knew that lying on his left side made the beats feel stronger, that certain positions made them more noticeable, that his heart rate dropped to about 55 beats per minute in deep rest. He started tracking everything in a notebook. Heart rate in different positions, after different foods, during different times of day. Maybe if he collected enough data, he'd find a pattern, something that would explain why this was happening. But the numbers revealed nothing, except that his heart was boringly, consistently normal. His lowest point came on a Wednesday afternoon. David was sitting on the bathroom floor, having what he supposed might be called a breakdown. He'd been trying to take a shower, but standing under the hot water had made his heart rate increase slightly. And that small change had sent him spiraling. Why could he feel this? Why wouldn't it stop? What had he done to deserve being so aware of his own body that living felt like torture? His wife found him there and just sat down beside him. She didn't say anything at first, didn't try to fix anything. She just held his hand and sat with him on the cold tile floor. After a long time, she spoke. "We'll find someone who can help." But David was tired of looking, tired of explaining, tired of hoping that the next doctor would have an answer when all the previous ones hadn't. He felt guilty for putting her through this. She'd married someone healthy and normal, and now she was stuck with someone who couldn't get through a day without obsessing over his own pulse. He started avoiding mirrors because he didn't recognize the person looking back. The guy in the reflection had dark circles under his eyes and a perpetually worried expression. He looked older than 34. He looked defeated. Online, David found a support group for people with various types of health anxiety. He attended one meeting via video call. Everyone had their own story, their own symptom they couldn't let go of. One woman was convinced she had cancer despite multiple negative tests. A man couldn't stop checking his temperature, certain he had a fever. Another person examined every mole on their body daily, terrified of melanoma. They all understood the loop he was in. The noticing, the worrying, the noticing more because you're worried. But David insisted his situation was different. He wasn't worried about his heart. He just couldn't stop feeling it. The moderator gently suggested that the distinction might not matter. Whether the awareness caused the worry or the worry caused the awareness, the result was the same. A mind trapped in a cycle it couldn't break. That conversation stayed with David. Maybe he'd been thinking about this wrong. Maybe the question wasn't, how do I stop feeling my heartbeat? Maybe the question was, how do I live with feeling my heartbeat? But he didn't know how to answer that second question either. His wife suggested they try one more specialist. A neurologist, this time. Your heart is fine, she reasoned. So maybe it's about how your brain is processing the sensation? David was skeptical but agreed. What did he have to lose? He'd already lost his job, his social life, his peace of mind. One more doctor's appointment couldn't make things worse. The appointment was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, David tried to just survive. He stopped trying to fight the awareness, and instead, tried to simply endure it. Some days were marginally better than others. Some days were worse. But every day, without fail, his heart beat on, and he felt every single beat. The neurologist's office was different from the other doctors David had seen. It was quieter somehow, more thoughtful. The waiting room had soft lighting and comfortable chairs. When Dr. Rodriguez called him in, she spent the first 20 minutes just listening to his story. She didn't interrupt or jump to conclusions. She just listened. When David finished explaining everything, she nodded slowly. Your heart isn't the problem, she said. Your brain is. Before David could feel insulted, she continued. Not that there's something wrong with your brain, but something has changed in how your brain is processing sensory information from your body. She explained something called interoception, which David had never heard of. It's your brain's ability to sense what's happening inside your body. Things like your heartbeat, your breathing, your digestion. Most people have a filter that keeps this information in the background. You know your heart is beating, but you don't actively feel it unless you focus on it. Somehow, David's filter had malfunctioned. Think of it like a radio, Dr. Rodriguez said. Normally, your brain keeps the volume on your internal body sensations turned way down. You can hear them if you pay attention. But mostly, they're just quiet background noise. For some reason, your brain has turned that volume up, way up. And once it's up, it's hard to turn back down because you're constantly listening to it. For the first time in months, David felt something like hope. This had a name: interoceptive hypersensitivity. Other people had experienced it. It was real, documented, understood. He wasn't losing his mind. Dr. Rodriguez explained that traditional treatments hadn't worked for him because they'd been focused on his heart. But since his heart was fine, they needed to retrain his brain instead. She introduced him to a type of therapy called biofeedback. The idea seemed counterintuitive at first. Instead of trying to ignore his heartbeat, he would practice paying attention to it deliberately, but in a structured, controlled way. Right now, your heartbeat feels like a threat, she explained. Your brain has labeled it as something wrong, something to worry about. We need to teach your brain that it's just information. Neutral information. No different from hearing birds outside or feeling your feet on the floor. David started sessions twice a week. He'd sit in a comfortable chair, connected to monitors that showed his heart rate, his breathing, his skin temperature. At first, Seeing his heartbeat displayed on a screen made the awareness worse. But slowly, over many sessions, something began to shift. The therapist taught him to observe without judgment. "Your heart is beating at 72 beats per minute," she'd say. "That's not good or bad. It's just a fact. Like saying the wall is blue or the room is 20 degrees. David practiced this neutral observation. Heart beating. That's all. Just a heart, doing its job. They also worked on what she called attentional flexibility. David would practice shifting his focus deliberately. Notice his heartbeat for 30 seconds. Then shift attention to sounds in the room. Then to the feeling of his hands on the armrests. Then to his breathing. Back to his heartbeat. The goal wasn't to stop feeling it, but to prove to his brain that he could choose where to place his attention. Progress was incredibly slow. Some days, David felt like the therapy was working. Other days, he felt worse than ever. His wife came to one session with him, and the therapist explained that recovery wouldn't be linear. There would be setbacks, bad days, moments of despair. That was normal and expected. What helped most was talking to other people who'd experienced this. Dr. Rodriguez connected him with 2 former patients who'd given permission to be contacted. Both had lived with heightened body awareness for years. Both had found ways to manage it. Talking to them, David realized something important. They hadn't gotten cured. They'd learned to coexist with the awareness. They'd made peace with it. One of them said something that stuck with David. "You know how you can hear your own voice when you talk, but you don't really think about it unless someone records you? That's what this became for me. My heartbeat is there. I can feel it if I pay attention. But most of the time now it's just background. Part of living. Not special. Not scary. Just there." David wanted that. He wanted his heartbeat to be boring again. The therapy continued. Weeks turned into months. He learned techniques for grounding himself when the awareness felt overwhelming. He practiced mindfulness in a way that wasn't about eliminating the sensation but about changing his relationship with it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, life started to feel manageable again. David began working part-time from home, just a few hours a day. He could focus on tasks for longer periods now. His heartbeat was still there. Still noticeable, but it had moved slightly from the center of his attention. Some moments, he even forgot about it for minutes at a time. Those moments of forgetting felt like miracles. 6 months after that terrible Tuesday morning, David walked back into his office building. It was only for a few hours, only part-time, but it felt significant. His colleagues welcomed him back cautiously, unsure what to say. David didn't try to explain what had happened. How could he? Instead, he just smiled and got to work. The heartbeat awareness hadn't disappeared. He could still feel it, especially when he stopped and paid attention. But it had become something he could live with. The therapy had taught him that fighting it only made it worse. Acceptance, strange as it sounded, was more powerful than resistance. His wife noticed the change in him. Not a dramatic transformation, but small improvements. He laughed more easily. He slept in their bedroom again. He could watch a movie without that distant, distracted look in his eyes. One evening, they went for a walk in their neighborhood, something they hadn't done in months. David enjoyed the sunset, the cool breeze, the feeling of her hand in his. His heart was beating, yes, but so was hers. So was everyone's. That was just part of being alive. Work slowly became easier. David found that when he focused on tasks, really engaged with them, the heartbeat awareness faded into the background. It was still there, but it wasn't everything anymore. His boss noticed the improvement and started giving him more responsibilities. David accepted them carefully, not wanting to overwhelm himself, but also wanting to prove he could handle normal life again. The support group he'd joined online became an important part of his routine. He shared his progress and encouraged others who were struggling. He told them what had helped him: the right specialist, the right therapy approach, the willingness to accept rather than fight. Some people found his advice helpful. Others weren't ready to hear it yet. David understood. He'd been there, in that place where hope feels impossible. One day, about 8 months after everything began, David realized something remarkable. He'd gone an entire afternoon without thinking about his heartbeat. Not because it had gone away, but because he'd been genuinely absorbed in a project at work. When he finally noticed it again, later that evening, he felt proud rather than distressed. This was progress. Real, tangible progress. His relationship with his wife deepened in unexpected ways. Going through something difficult together had forced them to communicate more honestly. She'd seen him at his worst and stayed. He'd learned that he didn't have to be strong all the time, that asking for help wasn't weakness. They were closer now than they'd been before, though David wouldn't say he was grateful for the experience. Some lessons cost too much. Dr. Rodriguez had warned him that he might always be more aware of his heartbeat than average people. The sensitivity might never completely go away. But she'd also taught him that sensitivity wasn't the same as suffering. Plenty of people are highly sensitive to various things: lights, sounds, textures, and they learn to adapt. David was learning to adapt too. He started running again, cautiously at first. The first time he felt his heart pounding after a jog, he had a moment of panic. But then he remembered what he'd learned. This was normal. This was what hearts do after exercise. Instead of fearing it, he tried to appreciate it. His heart was strong, healthy, working exactly as it should. That pounding meant his body was alive, capable, resilient. A year after that first terrible awareness, David ran a short race. Just a 5-kilometer fun run organized by his company. He wasn't fast, and he wasn't trying to be. But as he crossed the finish line, feeling his heart working hard in his chest, he smiled. A real smile. He'd done something he'd thought might be impossible months ago. His wife was waiting at the finish line, cheering for him. She hugged him, sweaty and tired as he was, and David realized something profound. His heart had been beating through every moment of his life. When he was born, taking his first breath. When he learned to walk. His first day of school. Meeting his wife. Their wedding day. Every good moment and every bad one. His heart had been there, faithful and constant, keeping him alive. The awareness he'd developed, as terrible as it had been, had also given him something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for the suffering, but for the realization of how much he'd taken for granted. His body was working constantly to keep him alive, and he'd never really acknowledged that before. Now he couldn't ignore it, but maybe that wasn't entirely bad. David still had difficult days. Probably always would. Sometimes the awareness would spike, especially during stressful periods or when he was tired. But he had tools now. Techniques for managing it. Perspective to keep it from overwhelming him. And, most importantly, he had the knowledge that he could survive it. He'd learned that sometimes the solution to a problem isn't making it go away. Sometimes, it's learning to carry it differently, to make room for it in your life, without letting it take over everything. His heart was beating. It would keep beating until the day he died. And somehow, after everything, David had made peace with that constant rhythm. It was no longer his enemy. It was just part of him, like his thoughts or his memories or his hopes for tomorrow. And that, more than any cure, felt like healing.